Hey guys, this is chess coach Andrew Rankin. Today I want to show you a line I really enjoy as black when facing the London system. I like this setup for several reasons. First, it gets white out of their comfort zone almost immediately. Second, it allows black to equalize fairly quickly and simply, whereas most lines require 15 moves and several knight reroutes to finally feel like you're fighting back. And lastly, there's a really nice trap we're going to go over. I should note that I learned this system from watching one of Hikaru Nakamura's game. He played this several years ago in the Las Vegas $1 Million Open. But this was a game that I played online. It was a rapid game I played on LeeChess.com against a 2352 rated opponent. His name was Boring, so naturally he played the London. So the game starts with d4, d5, knight f3, not the accelerated London with bishop to f4 right away, but instead just knight f3. I played knight to f6. Now he goes bishop f4 and c6. So this is really the move that I like to do, and the idea behind c6 is that the queen is going to come out to b6 and harass this weak b2 pawn. That is the whole idea, and it really creates problems for white because all they really want to do is attack you on the king side. They want to forget about the center, keep it closed, and definitely not play on the queen side. I should note that in addition to c6, there's also the option of playing c5 and then queen b6. They're both similar, but c6 keeps your pawn structure nice and solid just in case things start opening up later in the game. So my opponent continues with e3, and now I play queen to b6, just tickling the b2 pawn. And the correct move here is queen to c1, which my opponent played. But I really want to show you guys a game that Hikaru Nakamura played and just knocked out his opponent really fast. So this is a line that's kind of what you're hoping your opponent's going to do. So you hope your opponent plays something like b3, and now you actually violate another principle. So first we violated a principle by bringing our queen out early. And next we're going to violate a principle by moving our piece twice. But we're going to play knight to h5. And if he goes bishop to g5, we can play h6, bishop to h4. And now the bishop is on this fourth rank. And that's exactly where we want him. So we play the move knight to d7, and we bait white into playing this move knight to e5. And this is a big mistake because we can play the move knight takes e5. And he can't play pawn takes because then we have queen to b4 check, hitting the king. And then we're going to pick up the bishop as well as defend our knight, and we're going to be up a piece. So that's why he has to play queen takes. And now our knights are under attack, but we have this really interesting move, knight to g4. And it cuts off the queen from running away, and we have the simple threat of just playing g6, trapping the queen. So white doesn't have time to play h3 because g6, and he loses the queen. Notice that our bishop is defending the knight. So that's why he has to play the move bishop to g3 to give his queen the h4 square. We continue with g6. Queen goes to h4. I should note that if the queen goes to h3, there's all kinds of terrible moves. Knight takes f2 and knight takes e3 are all excellent moves attacking the queen. A lot of people would be tempted to play knight takes f2 and then take the rook. But I think that knight takes e3 is much better because you're going to take this pawn, which is a second pawn, and then you're going to take the rook on a1, and your knight is less likely to get trapped when he's on a1 than he is if he takes the rook on h1. So that's why the queen has to go to h4. And now we just play the move bishop to g7. And it looks like we're just developing a piece, but actually we have the threat of bishop to f6, which once again traps the queen, or sends her to this square, which we noted just loses the game instantly. So in order to give the queen the g3 square, our opponent has to play the move bishop to e5, and after knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, hitting the rook, forcing c3, queen to c5, and king to d2. This position is already -7. for black. So this is completely losing, and that's the trap that we hoped our opponent went into. But instead our opponent played this move, queen to c1 instead of b3. So remember, after b3 we can play the move knight to h5 and go into all of this kind of stuff. But instead we just have queen to c1. But now you notice that our queen is actually probably slightly better than their queen, and their queen is definitely not going to be participating in attack on our king side. So we already stopped your typical London player from doing their typical idea, which is just attacking you on the king side. So instead they have to figure out what to do. So we have plenty of time to develop our pieces, and we can do so normally with moves like bishop to f5. My opponent played knight b to d2. I played e6, just closing the pawn triangle. And now my opponent just decided to go after the bishop pair, and I said, hey, I got all these pawns on light squares, that's perfectly fine. I play bishop to e4, hoping that he plays a move like f3, and he does that. And now I drop back, and I really don't care if he wants to take, because, hey, I'll open up the rook, no problem. So he first plays the move g4, and this pawn seems a little bit weak now that he plays g4. So also the fact that he's playing on the flank side, he's playing on the king side of the board, it's really important that we strike back in the center. Remember that, it's very important if your opponent is attacking you on the side to strike back in the center. So I played the move c5, he plays c3, I played knight to c6, just seemed like a very good square for the knight. My opponent finally took my bishop. I took back towards the center, so I still only have one giant pawn chain. He plays bishop to d3. The computer doesn't really like this move. Because I can take, he can take, and now his pawn structure and his king side are quite damaged, so it's not so clear where he's going to castle his king. And then I can follow up with rook to c8. And the idea is that the rook is lined up with the queen, so I have the very simple threat of knight takes d4. If he takes back, he loses the queen. So my opponent played knight to b3, just guarding the pawn. But hey, if this is the defender, then why not play simple chess and just play remove the defender? So a5, he goes queen to d2, getting out of the way, and now a4. And when he brings his knight back to c1, you notice his pieces are very uncoordinated. I don't know what these bishops are doing. I don't know what the queen's doing. The knight definitely doesn't want to be on c1, and so you always want to look for tactics when your opponent's pieces are so uncoordinated. And why don't I pause the video for a second and have you guys find a nice tactic. Alright, so I played the move knight takes d4, and he took back, which is a blunder because now we have bishop to b4 and the queen is pinned to the king, which he's going to lose, so we're going to sacrifice a knight and a bishop for a queen and a pawn, which is excellent. He plays knight here, threatening to go knight to c3, which blocks it, so I have to take the queen. He takes with the bishop, and I take here, and he resigns. But let's look at one variation that was important for me to calculate after knight takes d4, and that's the move queen to f2, which pins the knight. But we have this very nice variation that goes bishop to c5, pawn takes, bishop takes, queen to e2. We can actually just castle because it's really hard for him to do anything with his pieces. This knight actually has no squares, and the knight's going to get trapped. So threatening to win this pawn with a move like bishop takes b2 or queen takes b2, queen takes b2, and then bishop takes b2, which would win the knight. Actually, it wouldn't win the knight because the bishop's defending it, but we still win a pawn, and then we have 2-on-1, and we can probably, you know, get our rooks into the game, maybe double up. Yeah, his bishops are kind of everywhere, so maybe we double up, you know, like this or something like that, but double up on the c file and we'd do fine. But he might play a move like bishop to e5, which is one of the top engine moves, just guarding the b2 pawn. But now we have bishop to e3. And this is the computer line, and now the computer just suggests going to f1, and now the knight is going to fall, so we should take with the bishop, threatening to take this next, or with the, yeah, we take, actually the bishop guards that, so we just win the pawn, and we'd probably drop back here. And yeah, his pieces are still very uncoordinated. We won back our piece, so now we're just up 2 pawns. Unfortunately for him, he didn't find the move queen to f2, and he just blundered the tactic quite quickly. But yeah, I want you guys to remember this d4, d5, and then if he goes here or here, we can still just play c6. Well, I guess here you don't know he's going to play London yet, so you can play knight f3, but after bishop to f4, now you can play c6, and then you can just tickle the pawn and create all kinds of uncomfortable situations for white. So I really enjoy this position and this setup for black against the London. I've had good success, and I hope that was helpful for you guys. So take care. Bye.